Hi everybody, I'm Rick Gold. I'm a local activist. I do a lot of work with a lot of different groups, and this being Earth Day, I thought, well, God, I eat all this food all the time, and where does it come from? How far does it have to travel to get here to, Missoula so that I can enjoy it? And, especially organic, because organic just over the last few years has become much more popular with all the issues of the dangers of meat and pesticides and things. So, even this morning I was walking up here and I was thinking of, my New Balance shoes. They came all the way from China. So, how far do things travel so that we can enjoy them here? I think thinking more locally, this being Earth Day is a great way to increase the opportunities that we all have to share in all the great work that our local organic farmers do that probably never get a pat on the back and say, whoa, you're making my food. That is great, except you just have a hand in helping God make the food, obviously. But anyway, that's beside the point. So anyway, I invited a lot of different speakers today, and these 5 who have shown up today represent different aspects of the food. I'm going to have to unkey the door. Yeah. Oh, it does. Different aspects of the local food and science point of view. So we'll start off today with Jill Davies, who's a pure food activist living in northwest Montana. She speaks and writes on current trends in the production of foods and medicines with a focus on genetically modified organisms, which is GMOs for short, and on organic agriculture and seed saving. Jill got her bachelor's degree in mathematics, intending to pursue a career in analytical science, which she's doing anyway, right? But after a taste of graduate school, changed course and went into more holistic studies. Yay, Jill! She studied biodynamics at Emerson College in England in the early 70s and worked in the gardens on a commune in France and on a biodynamic truck farm in Switzerland before returning to the U.S. She went back to England in 1999 to attend a course at Shoemaker College on biotechnology and agriculture, and has been active in that issue ever since. She is currently the coordinator for the new Montana Organic Association and a board member of Western Sustainable Agriculture Working Group, and heads up their biotech committee. Jill will give us a brief description of genetically modified organisms and how they're constructed. She feels that it is imperative for us as citizens and people eating food, obviously, to understand the difference between traditional crop breeding and the genetic engineering of crops. Once people have that understanding, they then can understand the many concerns we have about GMOs, and there are many. And I've seen her present several times, and she's great. And please welcome Jill.
Thank you, Rick. Before I get rattling on, there's some handouts over here. And under the projector is a file of the soil and health effects of Roundup, which is advertised to be benign, but it is not. I also have files of test plots in Montana and surrounding states, and other resources. How many minutes do I have, Rick?
12.
12 minutes. This is an hour presentation that I've got to squeeze into 12 minutes. So, but thank you to Helen for, this is the first time I have it on PowerPoint. I've got 3 posters, and this first one is to introduce people to the concept that it's the cells that make the proteins. DNA makes proteins, but it isn't the DNA alone. It's the whole ecosystem of the cell. The talk gives the idea of the cell in a metaphor that as a medieval city. The nucleus is the castle of the medieval city. The membranes are the city wall. There's membranes all around with gates and gatekeepers. There's manufacturing plants called ribosomes, the little brown guys. Mitochondria are the energy plants, and the chloroplasts in the plant cells. There's food storage places. Think of it as a medieval city with a wall around it, gatekeepers in the wall. And the people in the city have specific jobs, like we do in cities. And those people are proteins. There's two classes of proteins, enzymes and structural proteins. But they're both proteins, and they're both what come out of the DNA and the whole mechanism. So enzymes are not just proteins in your stomach that digest food. Enzymes are important, are the most common protein, and they have a multitude of functions in every cell, in every living organism in the planet. I'm really going through this fast, so, I mean, there's a lot I'm skipping. Okay, so here's DNA, which is in the castle, which gives the instructions to the city. When a protein is needed, signals come in through the gate, the post office, the gatekeepers, and the messengers take messenger enzymes, actually carry messages from the gate to where it needs to go. It's really amazing how cells work. Anyway, a messenger will come to this enzyme called a polymerase, which is a conglomeration of enzymes, actually, a very complex enzyme. And it wakes it up, says, you got to make a protein. So the polymerase finds the DNA, and it opens up the double strand and goes along the DNA, opening it up. And the double strand is composed of bases. Each of the letters, or the steps of the ladder, are called a base. And at both ends of the base is a specific compound with a scientific name, but the first letter of those of the names of those compounds is A, C, G, and T. There are only 4 different ones. And so the arrangement of those bases, you can think of it as letters right now, gives the sequence, the structure, the message. That contains the message, the arrangement of those 4 bases. So when you hear they're sequencing the human genome, what they are doing is reading the arrangement of those letters in one particular direction. So anyway, this enzyme chunks along, opens it up. Other enzymes bring materials to it, and it makes, out of that activity comes a RNA strand, which carries the information. The only thing that's changed is T is changed to U, another slightly different compound. But the G stays the same, the A, the C. So then there's another enzyme in the nucleus, in the city, in the castle, that can do alternative splicing. So it can rearrange that sequence. And then another enzyme does cutting and pasting like you do on your computer to get rid of other stuff. I have other stuff here, but it's in your genome, 99% of your sequence, of the length of your sequence, 99% is other stuff. Only 1% actually codes for proteins that come out of DNA. So this cuts and pastes out a lot of the other stuff. And these enzymes can do their job in different ways for different codes of genes. So you can get different products. This is what I'm trying to explain. And then still in the castle of the city, the first cut RNA is changed to messenger RNA by these activities. And then part of the transport system of the city takes that messenger RNA out of the nucleus to the manufacturing plants, carries it out to the ribosomes. So then we're in a ribosome, and you have some more complex enzymes that do these jobs. They're the jobs in the city. One translates from this code to what proteins are made of. Who knows what proteins are made of? Amino acids. How many amino acids are there? Total. 20. You've heard me talk before. So there's a potential of 20 different, each one of these circles, like beads on a string, represents amino acids. So all the different proteins can be made up of different combinations of the 20 amino acids. But this code tells which ones go, and it takes 3 letters of this code to tell the enzymes which amino acid, and other enzymes are bringing the amino acids to these master enzymes, if you will. And it tells them which ones to put where by this code. So this translator is doing that while other enzymes are bringing this stuff, So here's an example. Tryptophan is one of our amino acids. Oh, my time is up already?
Well, keep going.
And UGG codes for tryptophan. All right. So here's how it's done in the lab. Plants do their pollination. It's all controlled by the defense mechanisms in plants. So plants can only cross with plants in their own species. Once in a while in genus, but it's pretty well limited to species. But when we get to genetic engineering, we're in a lab, a petri dish. We've got potato cells, and we know how to nourish them so that one potato cell can grow into a whole plant. So now we know how to do that in the lab. So what we do is we take these bits of DNA from pathological organisms, because pathological organisms are the organisms that have the capacity to invade cells. So to form our construct to invade these cells, first of all, we need a vector which carries the construct and invades the cells, and that's taken from Agrobacteria tumefaciens, which is a pathological organism that causes tumors in plants. We also need a promoter to turn that DNA on. I didn't show you, but a promoter sequence, this polymerase needs a promoter sequence to turn it on, to also tell it to do its job. That's taken from cauliflower mosaic virus. It is the most promiscuous, prolific promoter, and it's used in almost all the GMO crops that are out there because it's considered promiscuous. It can promote strongly, and it over-promotes so that it overrides the defense mechanisms that are in the genome itself. You need a marker. That's what they use is antibiotic-resistant sections that when they put this in, get this in, it goes in cells. It only goes in some. And if the cell then starts manifesting this construct, it will also create the antibiotic-resistant proteins. Then you spray or pour in some of the antibiotic. If the cell is resisting antibiotic, it will live. If it's not, it will die. So that's how they know how each plant, the plants that do successfully incorporate the construct. And then the trait, either Roundup Ready or BT are the most common, is connected to that, and it's connected. DNA is kind of like Velcro. It's got a hook and a loop, so that's how they kind of get all these to connect up. And then a terminator sequence that tells it where to stop. So when this is just squirted in there, there's no control over where in the genome it lands in the cells, how many copies are inserted. The construct can be scrambled, and the host genome is disrupted, and plant defenses are activated to try to get rid of this invader, and then there's all kinds of post-translation alternative processing. In other words, it's unstable, and there's no control. It's inherently unpredictable and dangerous. And I didn't go into horizontal gene transfer, but you kind of have an understanding of genome disruption. Our regulatory agencies have adopted the policy of substantial equivalence, saying this stuff is substantially equivalent to what has gone before traditional breeding. Baloney. The Europeans say, no, we have to use the precautionary principle, and they also have pushed through the biosafety protocol, international agreements. And I say no to corporate freedom, because all this is run by corporations and greed, and we must revive the corporate charter system.
Yay, Jill.
Sorry, it took more time.
That's okay. I bet we have plenty of time.
If people have questions, because we're going kind of fast, we'll have a space at the end of everybody's giving their presentation for questions. So next up is Helen Appau, Missoula County Extension horticulturist, owner of Biodesign Farm. I was going to say biodiesel, but that's probably it's a 30-acre certified organic vegetable and fruit farm. Also, she raised native plants for wild gardens, restoration, and revegetation. She's a board member of Organic Farming Research Foundation. I heard she's a great, gives great talks all over too about it. Her topic today is farms as natural habitat. Imagine that. Connecting conservation, food production, and community. Farms and ranches have the potential to provide corridors for wildlife and help to preserve native plant communities through agriculture. Though agriculture has not been considered a friend to wild areas in the past, many farmers and ranchers are studying what they can do to go beyond organic and become conservation farms. And here she is.
Thank you. Well, thank you for all being here today on this gorgeous day where we really can celebrate that we're sharing the earth with so many different organisms. And of course, we want to eat, don't we? I get sometimes a little irritated with my conservation biologist friends who call my farm a sacrifice area with their mouth full. But it is true that it does seem to be a little bit of a dialectic, agriculture, wild spaces. Agriculture is by its very nature a disturbed system. So how can we move towards wild spaces, make corridors for wild spaces through our farms, and still produce lots of food? Well, we need to recognize this, that basically river systems, animals, insects, they don't see these arbitrary private boundaries that comes from, well, we could go into a whole talk on that, but they don't recognize that. Come now. There we go. And it turns out that agriculture and wild spaces all have common resources and in common, and particularly in the West, what's the big one? Water. And a lot of people look at this and have different opinions on it. Some people think this is really ugly. Most of the conservation biologists, most of the ecologists. It's a really disruptive thing. A lot of people think this is really beautiful. So how do we get to some common ground on that? Well, we have to think about what it means to conserve on a watershed level. We're going to talk about water being important. So here's how the land that isn't in cities and urban areas. I showed this presentation to the Audubon Society, and they were all excited. They said, wow, 50% of the US land is in agriculture? Cool. 50% of the land that doesn't have cities on it is in either private cropland or private grazing land. That's a pretty huge chunk if we decide that agriculture is a sacrifice zone for conservation, right? So how much is in preserves? Well, not very much, actually. So clearly agriculture needs to be part of the conservation picture. And where's our common ground? Well, it turns out lots of researchers are finding that riparian areas, again, that water theme. And what do I mean by riparian areas? What's a good riparian area right in Missoula? Clark Fork, yeah, which runs through agriculture, runs through wild areas, runs through what else? City, human communities, exactly. So the riparian areas are really important for conserving species in decline, like birds, pollinators. it turns out that we have a crisis in agriculture. We don't have very many bees left for pollination. And that's because they need to migrate throughout the United States. And if they don't have sequentially blooming pollen and nectar sources, they can't do that. And of course, mammals need that connectivity as well. So the picture we kind of want to see is wetland areas, wooded draws, private agricultural lands, and then coming through communities like Missoula and the Clark Fork, all connected, all being very careful in things that affect wildlife, such as chemical use, such as our pollutants, our energy use, our waste, all of those kinds of things. So how do we restore agriculture? How do we try and get that connection with conservation farming? Well, the first thing is to mitigate chemical use. Support organic farmers, right, Steve?
Well, I would appreciate it.
Yes, yes.
On strictly a personal level.
Because the abrogation of chemical use has been shown to greatly increase, certainly insect levels, insect population levels, bird population levels. Just read an article or a letter to the editor in High Country News that frog populations are on the major decline, and there's good evidence that that's related to pesticide use. So first, we want to do no chemical farming. First, we want to do organic farming. And then we want to add to it some of these ecological principles, such as conservation areas, habitat connectivity, those water systems, and biological diversity. This is one of my favorite farms in Idaho. This is a wilderness area behind them, so they already have a conservation area near them, a preserve, right, U.S. Forest Service. They have habitat connectivity because they have left part of their farm so that they can connect around it from one wild space to another wild space. What a concept, right? And then biological diversity, and by that I mean not only species diversity, but is this all flat? Are there crops all on one plane? No way, look at that. Spatial as well as species diversity. Okay, so we already talked about organic agriculture being really important, increases bird habitat. Look what else we can do. Along with no spraying, we can plant native grasses in our ditches, in our irrigation ditches. They don't have to be bare. It turns out water moves just as fast through grass ditches as through those ditches that we burn. You know, we just need to ask the right question and do the research. So we can stabilize the banks, not have erosion, and provide habitat for any biologists in here? Any ornithologists in here? Good bird habitat, good insect habitat too. We can capture water on marginal agriculture land and create wetlands. We're trying to do this in eastern Montana. It's been really hard the last couple of years because we can't capture something that ain't there. This is what I'm really excited about. This is my work. We can enhance beneficial insect habitat within the farm. We don't have to have a monoculture, do we? We can have a wooded draw there. We can have a nice grassed waterway, and we can plant other plants through the farm as filter systems and as sequentially blooming plants for those pollinators. And it turns out that guess what? That benefits the farmer. Great work that Miguel Altieri is doing. He's my hero in California. He's trying to connect this wild space, which is the orchard, the non-orchard, the oak forest, with the vineyard and then the forest over on this side. So we have this corridor. He's playing with some with native plants, but mostly he's using non-native Mediterranean plants that have lovely bloom sequences. And surprisingly enough, it turns out that there are beneficial insects in this corridor coming from here, staying in here, that then go out and eat the bad guys in the vineyard system. Of course, now vineyards, they're doing pretty well. They're making quite a bit of money right now. They can afford to play a little bit. We may need to help some of our other ag systems figure out how to do this. And what I'm really excited about is taking Montana natives. This is our rubber rabbit brush, which you see all over the hills around here. Incredible pollinator plant. This is what I was doing when I should have been picking peppers and tomatoes this last summer. I was sitting out with my camera taking pictures of native pollinators. Here's some of our native bees, which have been encouraged in my system by planting a bunch of native hedgerows. Other things that we can do, we can encourage native grass planting in our grazing systems and look at when we graze them and when we hay them to time in sequence with nesting patterns. So if some of our land, even just small portions, aren't hayed or grazed as early, we can support grassland birds and get their nesting. Some great programs being done in this in other parts of the world. This is California. This is one of my exciting things. I'm kind of down on ethanol because to produce ethanol, you don't necessarily do good things for the earth in terms of doing a lot of tillage in the soil, lots of chemicals go into producing the crops that produce ethanol. This is Panicum virgatum, which is switchgrass. It's a native Montana grass. And there are some studies that show that ethanol production is as high with switchgrass as with corn. Wow, we could be planting switchgrass in eastern Montana and producing ethanol. Somebody else has to get on this. One of my favorite people in the whole world, Becky Weed, has started this program pretty much on her own, which is predator-friendly wool. Now there's a big one. There's one I would have had a hard time touching. How do we conserve wild animals? You guys maybe have heard that there's a little controversy with wolves and grizzly bears. Okay, how do you do it and still have these little woolly maggots here that can't protect themselves? Sorry, I come from cattle country. Well, you can have dogs and you can have these guys and you can do this. You can certify it as predator friendly and people pay a premium. In fact, Becky told me a month ago that Alice Waters, that fancy restaurant in Berkeley, only buys her land now. And then the kind of thing Jill was talking about, good breeding programs. This is Stephen Jones' program at Washington State University, and he's got an organic wheat breeding program that the Organic Farming Research Foundation has been supporting for years. Just supported again, I must tell you, this year, yes. And the reason we supported it again this year is someone we all know got up and made a big deal about the fact that he is working on a perennial wheat, meaning that it wouldn't have to be tilled every year. Wow. And he's not too far from it. He's probably 5 to 10 years from having a perennial wheat that will be economic. So can we do this in Montana without decreasing yields? Well, this is my farm, and I could have shown you the whole history of how I got there. I haven't been farming quite as long as Steve Elliott, but you know, it's about 20, 25 years now. You know, I'm almost old enough to have made enough mistakes to be able to do it right. And basically where I have finally come is providing that spatial diversity that we were talking about and species diversity and trying to do minimum tillage. So there's my soil, and at the end of winter it looks like that in the spring as well. And here we have living mulches in between, which means that we don't disturb the soil. The great thing about having the living mulches in between is we have habitat for those beneficial insects. That's a wasp eating an insect that would be going for my crops. And you know what he's got in his mouth?
Cabbage butterfly.
Cabbage butterfly moth, yeah. There's a few holes in those cabbages, but look at the size of those cabbages, and I haven't had any complaints. I was waiting for a complaint this year from people at market. I was going to say, well, you know, this is high protein broccoli. This is the Atkins broccoli and cabbage. But I didn't even have enough pests to use my joke. Bummer. The other cool thing is that we're getting habitat by not disturbing the soil, not keeping it bare in between the rows for pollinators, and we're getting increased fruit set. There's our native pollinator again. And we are actually getting a good yield. Not all of the minimum till systems or no-till systems that are organic. There are a lot of no-till systems that aren't organic. They use chemicals, chemical herbicides, are getting good yields. There's one guy in Virginia, Ronald Morris, who's really done a super, super job, way better than I've done. In fact, I'm going to go visit him with my friend from Oregon State here this summer because I'm so excited about his work. I want to see how he has done it. But our yield actually has been quite high, and the quality, those are red peppers that have been picked after 3 nights in a row below 25 degrees Fahrenheit. And clearly they were covered. You see that little snow on the ground just to prove it was cold. Mm-hmm. We're changing the plant physiology, the nutrient levels in the leaves by our soil management. And that's another hour talk. But we're never done. We're never done. This year, we're working on restoring our native grasslands, and I just finished potting up 200 hedgerow plants because we're going to put in native shrubs and trees that fruit for our birds this year in the new production area. And I'm just about done here. So what are the challenges to bring conservation and agriculture together? Well, we need more science to figure this stuff out. I mean, there are some things that we just don't know how to do. We need to figure out how to test things properly and see if we're asking the right questions and if the systems are responding in the ways we think, or if they're totally teaching us new things. Policy, we need to really get involved in policy, both in town. Everybody needs to go to the meeting Monday night with the city council and talk about the adoption of our greenhouse gas plan, has some agriculture in it, and linking the economic market and conservation together. So spending your dollars for conservation farming approaches. First thing, of course, is shop locally. Talk to the local farmers. Talk to me. Talk to Steve. Talk to all your farmers and say, hey, you know, what are you guys doing on tillage? And what are you guys doing on hedgerows and conservation things? And what are you doing for insects? And are you using chemicals? Are you organic? Those are the kinds of things you need to talk to the people that produce your food, because you can change them as the market. The other thing is there's some exciting new federal funding in the most recent Farm Bill, the Conservation Security Program and EQIP. And we need to make sure that we continue funding those programs because those are going to change agriculture and give growers money to convert over, number one, to organic, and number two, to some of our minimum tillage practices and to some of the practices that encourage wildlife. So what a good deal if we can actually pay farmers to do the right thing. So we need that federally funded. And we need to somehow figure out that connection. The university's doing it here between our human systems, our waste, our energy. This is a picture Steve Loken took in Europe where they've got it figured out. They don't have very many wild spaces left, so they've really had to preserve what we've got. We haven't done that in Montana. And the other thing is places like Wild Farm Alliance. And they're doing really super work trying to bring conservation and agriculture together. And that's my last slide. I think that's my last slide, yes. So,
there's obviously people doing powerful work here in all of our personal interest with food. Next, we're going to have Mark Laparco. He's from Syracuse University with a degree in food systems management. He has been director of the University of Montana's dining services since July of 1992, and this is the first time that I've known that. So he is also the executive director of the UM Food Services Management Purchasing Consortium. Mark is involved in a variety of campus greening initiatives, including the BioBus and the Earth Tubs composting system. Serves on UM's Recycling Oversight Committee. Mark has been a strong supporter of sustainable food systems for some time and has been involved with the UM Farm to College program since its inception. Mark's going to talk about the UM Farm to College program during our discussion here. So here's Mark.
Good morning. What I represent is that interface between academic and the pursuit of these ideas on the scientific side and the business side. And I represent the business side and a fairly substantial business in that my department purchases about $2.5 million worth of food a year. And we manage a $8 million plus budget. So there's significant potential to strengthen the relationship between producers and consumer. Obviously, I have a long interest. I don't think I'm an activist, although I guess that one piece said that I was maybe a maverick. I was responsible in the early 90s at Syracuse University for being the first college in the country, probably in the world, that outlawed irradiated foods. Now, outlawed. We we took a position on that and said that we would not serve any irradiated foods at our facility. So I've been involved, I have a lot of history with irradiated foods, so I have an interest in this. Part of my job is to kind of read the tea leaves and figure out what students are going to want and what trends are, in the same way that the fast food places and the big food places try to create those trends. Part of my job is to look at what's going on. And one of the things that I observe is that students and people in general are very interested in where their food is coming from. That there's more information out about irradiated, which is now called cold pasteurization to make it sound palatable. There is a lot of information about GMO, and people would probably fall out of your chairs if you knew how many sources you're getting GMO products right now that you don't know that you're getting it from in foods, unless you're unless you eat only organic. So I've had this idea for a long time, bouncing around in my head to do this here, but I haven't had the horsepower. I mean, I don't have extra bodies laying around. I don't have the people power to create this. So in a conversation at one of the recycling oversight committees, after a conversation about the earth tubs, Neva Hassenen from campus said, and I told her I was thinking about this. Well, it wasn't a week later, she came up with 4 students who they were assigned a project to essentially help us get this going. And that provided the horsepower that we needed to do this. So a year ago in May 8th, we did the first Montana Mornings, which was a meal downstairs in the second floor of all Montana products, a breakfast of all Montana products. And that was the inaugural event, and that started the Farm to College program, which I can pass this around and you can look at it. This has got a lot of information. Since I don't have a whole lot of time, I'll just let you know that. And so what I want to do is give you a little history of it, and that starts the history in that it takes resources to do this. I'm a state entity. I don't have a lot of labor laying around to do this, and this takes a lot of work because for me, I have a cost-plus contract with Cisco Montana Foods. It means I buy some 90% of all my food from one source, which means I have food buyers in my operations who can either via the computer or telephone or fax order anywhere from $5,000 to $20 to $5,000 worth of food, just like that. So you have to think about changing the culture of how they buy food and who they buy food from. So this has really been a fairly major educational process for myself, for my food buyers, and for the growers. We've developed relationships with some 41, where we've purchased food from some 41 local and regional food producers. We have a kind of a laundry list of potential buyers that's over 200. So, but the Farm to College program started with that event. It's transitioned to now where we are incorporating, instead of doing one-day events like the Montana Mornings was, the goal is to mainstream these products so that we're buying these on a regular basis. And so if we buy beef for this menu or recipe, it's all a Montana product instead of this one time for this one special event. So it's that whole transition of moving from one purveyor to many purveyors, and how do we do all of that and make it work. Our Farm to College program is not an organic program. This is really about an economic and, in my opinion, a political project, because everybody who has vested interest in this is going to have to, in this regard, become active and talk to their legislators about this. Because I'm bound by certain purchasing laws of the state. I can't just go out and buy a product from a purveyor. I have some procedures that I have to go through. So there is an element that's going to require political support to be able to do this. But I come from the basis, again, as a business person, that there's nobody out there that's going to take care of Montana except Montanans. You're not going to get the kind of support that we need to help the farms and the agribusiness in this state from the timber industry, from the mining industry, from those industries that exploit the resources of the state and take them out. But that's not the Farm to College program. That's a little different subject. But that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a level of interest from legislators to actually support the agroeconomic business in the state. And where I come into that is, again, through this program, we define local purchases as anything from the state of Montana, and we define regional as anything from surrounding states, so North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, we throw in Washington. Now, on a bigger picture, the reason that I do that is because I also know that, as I said, part of my job is to read the tea leaves, and other colleges are doing this. I was contacted from the University of North Dakota. They want all of our information, including vendor list. So if they develop a program that is local and regional, and their regional or local is defined as Montana, that's going to help growers in Montana. That's going to help producers in Montana. So there is a bigger, on a regional basis, kind of a bigger agenda. So in terms of dollar amounts, in a 10-month period from last May 8th, we've purchased $168,000 worth of food products from Montana producers and $198,000 from regional producers. So in 10 months, that's not a bad chunk of change going to local and regional producers. So it's we got to do it in a way, because I still, as I said earlier, I'm a business. I can't go all organic because, frankly, I can't afford that. And at some point, somebody has to pay that. Now, if the interest gets high enough and students and our guests are willing to pay more, then we can do more on the cash operation side. On the board plan side, board plan is all of my 2,400 students who have meal plans. I have to be extremely cost conscious to them, because if I have a significant increase in food costs, I have to pass that along, which means the price of a meal plan goes up. And I have to remain price competitive, because our students are very smart students, and they keep track of what we do on the meal plan side. So there's a balance that I have to strive for. We want to try to do as much as we can through this program, and we will do, and we will bend every rule out there to make this work, but we also have to be cost conscious. So I'll give you an example. The safflower oil that we are now buying to deep fat fry all of our products that we use in all of our operations, that's worth $18,000 to Montola up in Culbertson. That was $18,000. That's $18,000 worth of product we buy a year that we're now buying sourced from a Montana business, grown in northwestern North Dakota and northeastern Montana. All the oil seeds produced there goes to Cisco, who's our prime vendor. We buy it through them. They employ 500 Montanans. We buy that product. We use it. It's a more healthful oil for our students. It's got for anybody who eats for our the product. And when we're done with that, we give that oil to the biodiesel program, which turns around and is the oil is the product that the biodiesel bus drives. But the cost there, that oil cost me about twice as much as what I was paying for a comparable product. So, but in that case, the benefit, because it goes the full circle, is worth it. So that's just an example of one commodity. And the future, this is really a kind of a marriage between the academic and the business side on campus for us, which is real exciting, but it's also an interface, like you talked about, between the urban and the rural interface. So there's a lot of potential for this. It's really about an economic development. So we're off and running with it. It's pretty successful so far. May 6th, there's going to be a major event on campus. It's an all-day event, and we're going to have, that'll get a lot of media coverage. There'll be a lot of politicians and government officials there, we hope. And this is going to be this will be a big event. There's going to be a session in the morning talking with growers about how to do business with us, an educational piece there, a panel discussion with a pretty diverse group, and then there's going to be a lunch where we have specifically, we're going to arrange table seating so that there's media, politicians, end users, growers, all at the same table for continued dialogue. And then there's going to be a vendor fair with people who grow products, and that's going to be open to the whole area. It's open to anybody, but we're trying to get local restaurateurs in so that they can connect on that. So I think probably my time is up. Thank you. Oh, the flyers and stuff are down at, I know there's other events going on connected with this. They have them downstairs or outside or wherever.
So if you see flyers and you want them downstairs in the main info area, also at noon, right out in the library mall, there's going to be music and speakers and Mark doesn't know it, but there's going to be his presence needed out there too, I believe. Anyway, next we're going to have up Melissa Matthewson, who, right, Matthewson?
Yes.
Is currently seeking a Master's of Science from the Environmental Studies Department at the University of Montana. She comes from California, where she has worked as an organic agriculture advocate at the Organic Farming Research Foundation for a number of years before moving to Montana. She has a BA in Environmental Studies with an emphasis in agroecology from the University of California, Santa Cruz. She has served on the board of WWOOF USA and is currently involved with the Missoula County Community Food Assessment Project, probably part of the stuff working with Mark. The Missoula County Community Food Assessment is a collaborative project between the university and the community of Missoula. The project is steered by a committee of community stakeholders who, with students and faculty from the University of Montana, have been taking a look at Missoula County food system from production to consumption. She will talk about the research questions that the committee has identified, the research that they have been conducting, and the potential for this project to make positive change in the community's local food system. And also, I guess she's going to tell us about when that presentation is going to occur. So let's welcome Melissa.
Thank you. I just want to give kind of a brief, real quick overview of the project. There's a lot going on with it. But I just want to give a brief history of how it first got started. By Neva Hassanin, who's in the Environmental Studies program here at the university, and Maxine Jacobson from the Social Work Department got together last year and decided that it would be interesting to take a look at Missoula County's food system, which historically a community food assessment is really the need to take a look at the issues around food and how they're linked to community issues. So they got together, and the first step was they put together a steering committee of stakeholders from the community to guide the process. And this includes, there's some steering committee members here actually. This includes some farmers, representatives from the Montana Food Bank, folks from the County Health Department, from the Pavarello Center, from Garden City Harvest, from Campus Lutheran Ministries. It's a whole wide range of different people that have a stake in the food system and people that are not working in the food system but whose voice really needs to be heard in this process and help guide it along. So that was kind of the first step in designing the community food assessment. After that, the steering committee was charged with the goal of coming up with the research questions that would guide the process. What did we need to look at in the Missoula County food system? And they came up with two, one on the production side and one on the consumption side. And the production question that the steering committee came up with was what is needed for viable and sustainable commercial food production in Missoula County? What are the existing assets and barriers to creating a more viable and sustainable production system? So this was the first research question on the production side. On the consumption side, what concerns do Missoulians of various income levels and neighborhoods have about food? And this includes such things as cost, transportation to food outlets, access, eating behaviors, and choices. So all those are part of the consumption question. So those two questions have guided the process. And what Neva and Maxine did was put together a graduate research seminar this last fall. And this is where the university comes in. And there were 25 of us graduate students that participated. And we were charged with the goal of answering these research questions, along with working with the steering committee. So our first goal was to collect something that's called indicator data, which historically, it's really a way of looking at a food system, kind of a summary of what's going on. It includes such data as food system wages, agricultural resource base, how many farmers are farming in the county. It includes distribution, processing, all the different aspects that go into a food system. And it gave us kind of a historical picture of what has happened in the Missoula County food system. We went back to about 1950, and we went to about 1997. Most of the data was collected from Ag Census, Economic Census, and those kind of resources. So those were all compiled together, and that was a major chunk of the work last semester. We're also putting together a resource guide, a comprehensive resource guide of different food system resources that different people can use. And those two aspects of the research will be available at the end of May. And we're going to distribute those for public use then. There were two other parts of the research that we're currently engaged in. First is the consumption side. We've conducted over 700 consumer surveys in Missoula County. We have asked them about what are their concerns, what are their behaviors, and all in terms of consumption. These were conducted at the mall, at YMCA, YWCA, at a church, all throughout the community to kind of get a broad range of perspectives on consumption behaviors in Missoula County. We've also conducted 2 focus groups, which is kind of a group interview face-to-face with a certain population. And in this case, we did one with the North Missoula Community Development Corporation, and we also did one at the Montana Food Bank. And we also asked them what were their concerns about accessing food in Missoula County. And there's some really interesting results. I'm not going to present any preliminary results yet, but that research is going to be available in the fall. We don't have a date. We just decided yesterday.
Harvest Festival.
At a harvest festival, most likely. And there's some really interesting data coming out of this. It's really going to, I think, give us a good picture of what's going on. What are people thinking about food in Missoula County? The second part is on the production side. We've conducted a focus group with the Hmong farmer population here in Missoula County. I think we had about 11 Hmong farmers who are very active in agriculture, and we've asked them kind of what are their concerns, what are the assets, what does it take to be a viable farmer in Missoula County. That's got also some really interesting data, and it's been really great to have them be a part of the process because they are a part of the agricultural resource base here in the county. Second, we have Libby Hensley, who's a graduate student in the environmental studies program, she's doing her master's thesis on development issues as they relate to farmers and ranchers in the county. And she has already interviewed 14 different farmers and ranchers in the county, and in-depth interviews ranging from about an hour to an hour and a half. And she's got a lot of data to work with and some really interesting things that are coming out of that. And I'm not sure what her timeline is for finishing that report, but by the end of the semester, somewhere in midsummer. The last part is what I've been most involved in, is a phone survey with farmers and ranchers in the county. And we've interviewed 52 farmers and ranchers, mostly sheep, producers, cattle, hay, not many fruit and vegetable. I think we interviewed someone that's making wine and some flower growers. And what we did was we had, I think it's 80 or some data points that we asked them different questions about what it takes to be a viable farmer in Missoula County, asking them what factors facilitate viability, what factors don't contribute to keeping their farm in operation. We asked them about local markets, development, some really interesting data coming out of that too. And all of this will be available for public, most likely in the Fall Harvest Festival. So that's kind of where the real brief overview of what we've been doing. The next step is for the steering committee to kind of take a look at all of this data and really take, with all their expertise and all of their experience, come up with what are we going to do with the data? What are some possible recommendations or actions to make some improvements or to uplift existing resources in the community's food system. So that's kind of where the process is at this point. And we hope to have it all wrapped up this fall. So that's kind of a real brief overview of that research that's going on.
Thank you. Well, if you haven't already guessed, part of the idea behind this panel is how can people get more intimately involved here on campus and with students and dining services and out in the greater community with our farming community. And it seems like there are many places we can all get involved with our own food. So having said that, we're coming to the time that we're introducing Steve Elliott. He's been described as the Methuselah of the Bitterroot Valley. Long
By
time,
one person.
a long time organic.
Multiple times.
He's a longtime organic farmer and owner and steward of Lifeline Farms. You know, the guy who brings us Lifeline organic milk and milk products in our local grocery stores. Currently, I guess he's been busy with Little Lambs. He's been on many boards and committees, too numerous to list, and today he's going to present us with his experiences with the local farming community, or his local experiences for our Earth Day enjoyment. Let's welcome Steve.
When Rick asked me to speak here, I always get this pit in my stomach whenever I'm forced to get up in front of people and give an opinion on anything. And as you can see, my resume is he asked me to send in my resume and a short sentence or a paragraph, I believe he said, of what I was going to talk about. And he gave me 8 to 10 weeks to come up with this, and of course they all went by. And I'd given it a fair amount of thought, and so I sent him in my resume, and it said, that I've been farming for 23 years, which puts me pretty equal to Miss Methuselah over there. But the fact is that my resume is that I'm a farmer. It's what I've done pretty close to half my life, and I came into it from a a need to be socially responsible, not to become a farmer. I was raised in Los Angeles, and when I got out of high school, I decided that Los Angeles was not the place for me. And in the next 7 or 8 years, I spent traveling around looking for that mythical place, and with my dog hitchhiking, and my dog happened to die in Montana,
Oh.
and I owed the veterinarian some money, and so I got a job here, and in my travels I'd become a construction worker, and I was self-employed, and so you can probably guess that at 27, hanging wallpaper from basically a hippie point of view was not very fulfilling for me. And I was traveling through the Bitterroot Valley, and there was a little farm stand, and the woman that was manning it was dressed all in white. And even then, you know, in 1980, I guess, someone dressed all in white, I thought, well, geez, you know, this is a cult here. But nevertheless, I stopped to see if they needed any help, and as it turns out, it was the Lifeline Farm Stand in Hamilton, which is where McDonald's is now, and that was Ernie's mother, taking care of business there at our farm stand, and I went up there and went to the farm to volunteer, and it was very hectic. We were growing 70 acres of vegetables in 1980 in Montana with no organic market. And you know, with hindsight, no real plan. We were all in our mid-20s, and I, of course, had just arrived, and there was a woman that seemed to be organizing things, and it was really hectic. At times we'd have 23 people working at our, well, we would count them at breakfast. We would always eat together at breakfast, which is around 10 or 11 after we'd done a fair amount of harvesting. And I said, people running around, I said, I'm here to volunteer. And she said, thank God. She handed me a stalk of broccoli, and she says, pick the worms out of here and put it in a box. And so that was my introduction to agriculture on that day. And that was 1980, summer of 80, I believe. Could be 81. So the point I'm trying to make here is my relationship with agriculture, my relationship with the farm, is a long and slow and arduous one, one could say. And what I'm going to talk about is that relationship. And that being said, giving you an idea where I started, I'm going to skip over 10 or 15 years because that involves my basically being overwhelmed by the diversity of the infrastructure, trying to learn how to be an electrician, plumber, mechanic, all those things that a small farmer must need to know. And as time went by, I became, I'm very fortunate in that I am not particularly good at anything, but that gives me lots of room to be mediocre at a lot of things. And that has been a real positive trait in my life, because it's managed to give me the name of Methuselah. Because I think that if I was really good at just one or two of them, that I would become a specialist. And for a small farmer, that is not the best of traits. There are those talented individuals. But I'm not one of those, and so this has worked out well for me. So when Rick asked me to speak, and after a week, I convinced myself, well, I can wing this. After all, I've been doing this for 23 years. In the pit in my stomach, and I thought I'd talk about local agriculture real quick. And then I thought, well, that's what we all talk about, and then Helen's going to be there, and I thought Neva was going to be here at that time, and which was kind of her gig, and then Mark, and I thought, well, that I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the relationship of the farmer and the farm. And I didn't learn that, as I said, until, well, actually I'm learning it now. And so the gist of it is that, and I wanted to relate that to Earth Day. And the other pit in my stomach that was formed was the fact that he said it would be on Earth Day. And I've always thought of, I mean, I'm Methuselah, so I've been around since the first Earth Day. And it's always seemed to me kind of a hallmark kind of thing, that we get out there rather than send each other's cards, we pick up a little litter in that, and it offers the ability for us to feel a little better and move on. And then it dawned on me that, you shouldn't be so darn cynical all the time, that we might as well have a day that we call Earth Day. And so I'm going to describe real quick, that's not true, I'm going to describe my relationship with the earth, which happens to be 47 acres in the Bitterroot, because I often like to point out that when I became a farmer, it's kind of like, I mean, this is kind of gruesome, but when I was a child, I was into horror stories and stuff like that. I didn't realize it was like being bit by a vampire, that once I became a farmer, I was never going to see a summer again. I mean, that I would be very, very busy during that time, and that I would never, really get to do what I had come to think of as summer activities. But as the years have gone by, and I have learned that it's pretty much just all the same. I mean, what we do in this world is we get up and we move things around, and whether it's your backpack or your fishing rod or in my case irrigation pipe and thousands of pounds of vegetables, that's what I'm doing all summer anyway. So I've embraced the idea of bending over, picking things up and moving it around. The farm and the farmer is on a small level, not talking about big agriculture here. Have you read Dick Manning's piece in Harper's last week? And if you, I mean, basically agriculture can be blamed for our whole environmental mess, and from the beginning, which allowed to move armies around and whatever. We can go back and blame agriculture for the whole ball of wax, but that's a question of scale. I mean, it gets, the larger the farm, the bigger advantage it has of creating destruction. But the farmer and the farm on my scale, on my 47 acres, is a relationship that the longer I'm at it, I realize that I have more and more trouble drawing lines in the relationship. On my farm, we have animals. We have those little furry things. We have sheep. We're lambing right now, and we have that big obnoxious furry thing called a llama, and we are predator-friendly wool producers. But we also grow vegetables, and as you know, the other half of our farm, the dairy, does all that. But I'm pretty much vegetables and lamb and bedding plants. And anyway, so on our farm, we have the land, which is the land and the soil and the wild lands, because at 47 acres, there's a drainage, and which is planted with willows, and restoration work is going on by itself without much influence by me. And the soil, the land is the soil, and the animals and the farmer all become kind of meshed together. I mean, most of what I do is really tedious stuff. I mean, yesterday I pulled a pump out of the ground, and this morning, when I got up this morning, I'm walking around thinking, but I'm grabbing some hay here and I'm throwing it over there, and I'm grabbing the last of the potatoes to feed to the cows that I didn't eat this summer, and now they're too far gone to do anything else with. But these type of things, this relationship that goes on, it gets so blurry. I mean, this morning when I walked out to get the hay, I took off the top bale, and underneath is just this bright green. And I remembered, what a killer hay year we had last year. And as I walk down through the fields, I go through and I see, I walk by a spot of land that we have the pasture in right now, or not the pasture, the hay ground, which we grow to feed the sheep, which is in vegetables, because 4 or 5 years ago because it needs a rest, and so now it's at hay ground and it's feeding the animals, and all this stuff's going on. As I go by, I look down there and I can remember, for some reason out of the blue it comes back, I remember the cabbage that was grown there 6 years ago, and I can remember the day that you know, the corns that I picked and then turned into silage, which I fed to the sheep, which then turns into, the part they spill gets in with the bedding and their manure, and I turn that into compost, and then the compost goes over here, and then it gets back in the soil, and then it feeds the plants, and then we've got the cabbage again. And the gist of it is that I realize that the entity involved here is the farm, that I am just like, maybe I'm the will, but also I'm the blood. I'm the part that makes things action. I'm the action on some level. And then when it comes, then all of a sudden the realization hits you that, well, yeah, that's true, but the bulk of stuff goes on without you at all. You know, I mean, the fact is that a friend of mine who's a writer says, well, let me get this straight. You're always trying to get pats on the back for working so damn hard. And what you do, you throw a few seeds out and God does everything, and then we get this food. And I go, well, yeah, but that doesn't make me feel that good, you know. But in reality, it's that relationship there that does feed me. It's not the relationship of my intrusion into the world that creates a better crop. I mean, I find that interesting, and that's what I do day to day, and that's what satisfies me intellectually. But the other part is what feeds me, what sustains me. And I was reading a Wendell Berry piece the other day, and he had read a soil science journal, and the scientist had said, made the comment that as the rain falls into the canopy of plants, it falls in random nature, and it hits the leaves funnel it down to the stems, yada, yada, yada. It goes down and it feeds the plant, it disperses, it feeds the life in the soil. Then when it hits the subsoil, it's random again. It goes from randomness to pattern to randomness. And the use of the word random there is a category which now we can discount in a way. Because random, fluke, act of God is something that we categorize as unimportant often. I mean, on some level, often, you know. And in reality, when we compartmentalize it that way, it makes us focus on the pattern. Right. Well, as a farm, what we really ought to be looking at, what Wendell Berry says is the randomness merely a limit of our perception rather than random? Is if we were standing up higher, wouldn't this randomness become a pattern? And when we call it random, and we don't consider that, then it's easier to forget that the pattern is forever increasing. And so that we have the ability to destroy the pattern when we focus on the smaller pattern and call the evolution of the pattern as it gets bigger, random, or an act of God, or sometimes outside our information. Well, because of the diversity of my work, that, as you know, I own wallpaper, and then I had to learn how to do everything else. That mystery happens to me a lot because that middle section is constantly getting bigger for me, but it doesn't change the percentage of the other two sections. The mystery always stays massive as hard as I work on the patterns. And as a farmer, and thanks largely to people like Helen and other people working primarily on the patterns, you know, I get to tap into that information and push that out farther and farther, so that my information allows me to do greater things. But nevertheless, because I've been beat so hard by the mystery on either side, I have an incredible respect for the restraint that it takes in a natural to work within a natural system. What we have, so as a farmer, I've become this greater thing. This relationship that I have with my farm, on some level, I lose the fact of my individuality. By the same token, we look at a plant, and in the beginning, I looked at, okay, I got out my books, and I said, well, okay, this is a heavy feeder. Yeah, I put it into very simplistic categories of what everything's needs, and I talk about the plant, and I think about the plant. And then as I get to go know more and more things, I realize that, well, really, I've got this individual plant, but for my purposes, growing mostly vegetables, there are subtle differences, but they all take somewhat similar approaches and similar needs. And so it would probably be smarter if, rather than looking at the plant, I looked at the topsoil, the environment around the plant, and the plant as the entity, as opposed soil, plant, environment as the entity rather than the plant. This has worked very well because it inspired me to work on my rotations to create a better world for my vegetables. And as it turns out, as we follow this evolution down, that we have farmer land, farmer farm connection with animals land, we have soil plant air connection. As we move it out, then we've also got farmer consumer community. I mean, these three things are all part of the same thing. I mean, if you take this logic out, I'm trying to go a little faster here. If you take this logic out further, you know, I love the word consumer. The other day, actually, I hate the word consumer, but I hate it so much I looked up consumption in the dictionary. This was years ago, but so I'm going to use customer here for some bizarre reason. But the consumption, the number 2 definition of consumption is a withering disease. And because at the turn of the century, that's what they called, well, I mean, it came down with consumption, you know, and our society has come down with consumption. But anyway, as we take the farmer, the consumer, and the community out there, then the point I'm trying to make is these lines, they get blurrier and blurrier the closer we look at them. And I don't know that we don't need to figure a way to communicate these blurry lines, because instead, our systems that we've put up together are creating lines. I mean, our government system works exactly the opposite. We argue our way to a compromise. And so that's kind of in the way we solve problems. And somehow, it seems to me that we have to figure a dialogue or a way to communicate that blurs those lines so that we can see the connections there. We come from, this is, environmentally, we come from a science point of view, which for very good reasons, we look at individual things and study them as well as we can. But for some reason, on the social level, we have to step back and look at things more as a community, as an interconnectedness of this thing. And this is something that's been sad for me about the environmental community, is that we have been forced into a situation, it seems that way, that we've gone the legal route to legislate, which is necessary. There has to be laws. But nevertheless, it falls into the us-them division of way of thinking. The other day I was driving down the road and I pulled up behind a car, and the bumper sticker said, "The true endangered species, miners, loggers, ranchers, And then through the dirt at the bottom, I could read the word farmer. And you know, this is a group I don't find myself in very often. But then I started to think that, well, this is a group I need to be involved in a little more often, because our community, if we can't, the biggest environmental destructive force that we've got going right now is our lack of communication, is our inability to communicate with each other and to understand each other. And part of that could be because of all the lines we draw and all the categories we create to explain things, for us to understand things. Whereas somehow we've got to figure out to get some way back so that what I've picked up from, doing what, I have in common with Nobel laureates, is I'm outstanding in my field, is that we need to figure a way to see that this connection is on a human level as well, on a cultural level, on a community level. That so often I think that we're blinded by our own guilt of our participation in the system, that we look for scapegoats, we look for enemies. I'm hoping that sometime we can come to a point where we can look at each other as people that pattern box hasn't gone far enough out yet. That give people the time to understand that it's all right to have the mystery there, and that it's kind of dangerous to mess around with that mystery. That's it.
Thank you.
Need some food in my belly, need some drink for the dry in my throat, need for the world to recognize it. Everybody's in the same holy boat. Don't you know it ain't right for people to go hungry with all the food being thrown away, just because it ain't the right size or perfect, cause you can't turn a fast dollar that way. You know it ain't right to make people grow coffee when their families could be growing food, working those lands for corporations. Don't do hungry people no good, cause people need food in their belly, need some drink for the dry in their throat, need for the world to recognize it. Everybody's in the same holy boat. People got to have food in their belly, need some drink for the dry in their throat, and need for the world to recognize it. Everybody's in the same holy boat. Don't you know it ain't right to cut the trees down just to grow a bunch of cheap hamburger meat? You know those trees, they hold the topsoil, and those burgers aren't fit to eat. And you know it ain't right to punish the farmers for growing food clean and poison free. There ought to be a government who protects them, protects dollars where they need to be, cause people need food in their belly, they need some drink for the dry in their throat, they need for the world to recognize it. Everybody's in the same holy boat. People got to have food in their belly, need some drink for the dry in their throat, they need for the world to recognize it. Everybody's in the same holy boat. But you know we spend 25 million on a movie, not even worth being shown on TV. We spend $2 billion on an airplane that we claim nobody else can see. Then we spend 800 billion on defenses, planning new ways to blow each other around. But even 1% of that budget could stop a whole lot of hungry sounds. People need food in their belly, need some drink for the dry in their throat. They need for the world to recognize it. Everybody's in the same holy boat. Got to have food in their belly, they need some drink for the dry in their throat. Need for the world to recognize it. Everybody's in the same holy boat. Everybody's in the same holy boat. Everybody's in the same holy boat. Kinda makes me wonder if we're gonna stay afloat.